Hey, I'm Gary Streigler, and I'm back to talk more about clamps. I hope you caught our first video on pipe clamps. So in that video, I did share that I'm kind of almost a clamp hoarder. Originally, I thought maybe I had like 120 clamps in my shop. That's what I wrote down. As it turned out, I had 302. Again, that's from a lifetime of collecting clamps. You know, most of the time when we're clamping something, it has to do with holding it until glue sets up or bring a joint together for gluing. But, you know, clamps can also be a third hand, you know, something that holds something in place. Sometimes they can be used to persuade to move something. I talked in that first video about and showed you a kind of clamp that can not only pull things in but also push to spread them if you need to. So clamps aren't just for gluing, although that's probably what we use them the most for. Now, one of the types of clamps that I use a bunch, this is generally called a K-body clamp, and it does a lot of the same things as a pipe clamp. Generally, it's going to be a little more expensive than a pipe clamp. One of the nice things about it, though, is it has a wider clamping surface and comes with pads. For example, you know, if I want to clamp this nosing on this shelf, I've got protection for the shelf on both places, and my clamping is over a pretty wide surface. I have even occasionally, if I'm trying to, this is going to be like an extreme example, but you know, if you really want to put the clamping pressure this way, you could cheat. I'd be more likely to do it, you know, just a little bit like that. But at any rate, you can kind of focus the clamping pressure. And these come, you know, I've got, this is I think one that clamps up to 12 inches. I've got a bunch of them that clamp 24 inches. I have maybe like two that'll clamp more than that. But, you know, these are nice clamps. It's really important on these, and I shared previously, I know better than I do probably, I need to clean some of the glue off this. You can get to where, especially if the glue gets on these edges, they won't work as well, and so you just need to scrape the glue off of them occasionally, and unfortunately I'm not as good at that as I should be. All right, moving on. Some of the first clamps I bought were clamps like this. I call these a bar clamp. They're probably some of the least expensive clamps you can buy. They kind of adjust up and down on a bar. Again, it's really important not to get glue all over it. This one actually had a pad here that I lost. Again, I know better than I do. You know, these will put clamping pressure in a small area. Also, by the way, if you build any kind of a work surface, you know, this top overhangs. If I was wanting to just temporarily hold something, you know, I might grab this clamp like that, or if I've got, you know, sometimes I've got a massive bunch of stuff to glue up and it's kind of all hands on deck. Like when I build doors, sometimes I need to have a whole bunch of clamps to glue the stiles and rails together. Might end up using something like this. And these are, they come in different lengths also. I think I've got some of these maybe up to 2 foot. They come in smaller sizes. Again, they can be pretty versatile. They're a little less expensive than a K-body, but to be honest, I don't use these near as much as I do a K-body. All right, I got a bunch of these in my shop. A C-clamp, and this particular C-clamp, one of the nice features about it is it, you know, you can really adjust. It also has a thick, deep throat. I really like the way this pad swivels. This is a very, very heavy-duty C-clamp. Anytime I'm doing curved trim, I'm going to be using this to glue up my laminating layers and such. But I use these a lot also for that. Again, just hook it on to hold something in place to that. So these are very, very versatile. By the way, if you go back and look, the clamp companies will give you something that'll say how much pressure they're going to be able to put on. Of course, my general rule is I simply think, you know, if I'm gluing something together, if it pops glue out of the joint, probably got enough pressure. These do have, you know, if you happen to be clamping something on a finished surface, you probably need to use a pad strip. You know, all a pad strip is just a sacrificial piece of wood, you know, that you might put like on the front of this shelf so that you didn't damage the front edge of the shelf with that pad, just a scrap piece of wood. That, when we refer to a pad strip, that's what we're talking about. So, you know, then it goes all the way down to, here's another C-clamp. Now this isn't adjustable in the fact that it doesn't slide up and down, but you know, if you were to go down the other part of my shop, you would find down there's times where I have like jigs and things held to shapers and molders that I just take a C-clamp and hold that jig in place. So sometimes, you know, these smaller ones are, again, they're almost like a third hand where they can, but you can put a lot of pressure on them to hold something in place. Well, here's an interesting one. I don't know what you call this, a ratchet clamp or what you'd call it. This does a lot the same as a C-clamp, but it is, and I don't use, it'll really put on a lot of pressure. You start like this, and it's fast. You know, that's a lot of pressure and a lot of speed. And these come in all sorts of different sizes too. They're kind of a specialty clamp. They do have a pretty nice big pad, but the same thing, if you happen to be using them on something where you're going to have a finished edge, you better protect them with a pad strip. Again, these, a lot of pressure, really fast. All right, kind of getting back to, we're getting more and more specialized. I've got a bunch of these. These are spring clamps. They come in several different sizes. I got 3 sizes. This is the middle size. They do have padding. I might use this to just temporarily hold something in place. When I first started using them, the very first time I bought some, I was building a curved stairway with a lot of thin layers like this. And I still use them if I'm clamping something up and maybe I don't quite get good pressure at the top. You can kind of put a bunch of them on there and they'll suck that up. And they don't have tons of clamping pressure. There's some jigs that I hold temporarily in place with these. So got a bunch of spring clamps that don't create a ton of clamping pressure, but you know what? As long as it's enough, that's all that matters. Okay, now these are clamps that I do use a bunch, Craig face frame clamps, and hopefully you've watched some of my videos, seen me using these. Sometimes though, these are pretty quick and they're quick to put the clamping pressure on and remove them. So I use these sometimes when I'm doing cabinet building to hold a guide, or if we're putting a face frame together. This is a great clamp. It's a plate clamp, and so when you're putting face frames together, basically all that matters is if you hold the pieces of your face frame down tight against this plate and clamp it, then when you put the screw in, the face of my face frame is going to be flush. That's a little bit hard to say. So really we're getting close to the end of the clamps. This is just, you know, you can buy these toggle clamps. This is one I had for some special application. You know, they put a good bit of pressure on. I was holding something in place real quick while I sanded it or something. This is one that, boy, some guys swear by these. I don't even know. I guess you call them a hand screw clamp. I don't know. But basically, you know, when you do that, and the guys that are really good at them can take this and they can adjust them back in, and then they can get there and just suck it right together. One of the things that I have used them for, see, I want to show how bad I am at this. If you don't do this exactly the same, they don't line up. But you can like use them if you want to hold something on edge while you work on something, these are good for that. Now, again, if you become an expert at it, they're really helpful clamps. They're wood on the edge, so they're not going to mar something up. I've only got a few of these. Like I said, just depends. This might be your favorite clamp if you're more of a furniture builder. The last thing I want to say at the end of this, sometimes there's homemade clamps. I shared a video where we use these clamps to clamp together a curved jam, and it's just simply, one of the 5 simple machines, I think, is the thread or the inclined plane, which is a thread. By tightening these bolts up, you put a lot of pressure on this. So there's other types of clamps, but I just wanted to share the clamps that I have in my shop, kind of hopefully not discourage anyone that they don't have 300 or more clamps, but there's always room for one more clamp, and they really can help you, whether it's sucking something together for glue to dry or being a third hand.